We are here. What are they
Here we
doing?
are. Season 3 episode. I already lost track. I think
Three-ish. Yeah.
three ish,
Yeah.
something
Three-ish.
like that.
hmm
So
Uh,
today, Alex is going to kind of take the lead. Our topic is going to be something he has a little bit deeper expertise on than me, which is pain science. We did an episode on this a little while back, um,
yeah.
but
Uh,
I think that our perspectives have changed a little bit over the last couple of years. We've learned some new stuff. I think we've changed our opinion on a few things. So we're going to do another episode on pain science and what we think about the science of pain, the perception of pain, how do we treat it, think some of those things. So um, that's the plan for today's episode. Take it
I
away,
like it.
Alex.
You got it, guys. Yeah. So we did one a while back. I think it was almost 2 years ago, and as part of just what we do, or you know, as part of just getting better at working with people, working on people, and just learning the process of the human body, things change, right? So even if I look back to what I was doing initially when we were doing pitching performance, when I was doing chiropractic, when I was doing body work, it's all changed significantly since then. There are some basic footholds that stay the same, but generally things continue to develop as our understanding of the body gets better or the research comes to fruition that we know may or may not exist, and that we believe in, right? So in the previous episode, I did I made the statement often that pain is like a power knot. It indicates where the tissue is damaged, or if there is damage, and pain and the tissue are like a one in one. That's not correct. Definitely not correct. I think that pain still is a variant of power. So like your body will only allow you to do so much. If you're in a certain amount of pain, there's only so much you can do to get yourself over that hump mentally or neurologically. You can only fight that battle so far. But recent research, there's a bunch of stuff. I need to go in order here, otherwise I'm going to get lost. Okay. pain. Pain comes from a lot of things, right? So pain can come from any type of stress to the body. So that means it can come from mental stress, physical stress, environmental stresses. I mean, literally any type of stress can create pain. It doesn't even have to be stress. A situation, or I guess that's the stress, stimulus and stress. Are those synonyms? Sort of.
Sort of. Yeah, I
Sort of.
suppose.
So I
Yeah.
guess you could say stress is, let's just use it as an umbrella term. It's not
hmm
perfect here, but let's use it that way because otherwise we're going to get lost in the weeds, Alex. Bring it back in. Okay, so stress, any type of stress to your system can be perceived as pain. That's how the human body works, because the allergic, or the alert is, oh, something happens, I'm uncomfortable, right? But pain doesn't directly correlate to damage done to the system itself as far as tissue,
hmm
which was more of my understanding a couple of years ago, was that tissue damage or damage done to the physical structure of the body creates pain. Now, you can argue that mental and emotional stresses do create physical damage because they increase cortisol levels. They do, they damage the body in other ways. They create
Yeah.
deficiencies, or they create energy sucks that then in turn make you less efficient in just living.
Yeah.
So then the
If you're going to
body,
define that as damage, it's cellular, it's
right,
biochemical. It's not
right,
so much mechanical damage. It's
hmm
not You're not going to tear your hamstring because you're
correct,
stressed out, but
hmm
on a biochemical cellular level, you might have detriment.
correct. That's the point I'm getting at, is that the pain may manifest as physical in the sense that you do not feel well, but the origin or the makings of the pain do not have to be physical, in the sense that the symptom does not have to be the source. The source
hmm
can create the symptom from other things. The system is not a one-to-one. The system is not a complete, it's not a circuit like this. It's more like a circuit that's like,
Yeah.
and then it comes back to the top end of the circle, right? So that's kind of what pain has, or my understanding of pain has moved towards. It's more of like that biosocial, somatic, psycho, like you take all those terms and mush them together and they
Yeah.
create different forms of pain, right? There are three key concepts of pain. So this all just kind of came out in an article not all that long ago. This kind of reiterates these points. I want to hit these points and then we're going to discuss these, because I think there's one on here that as soon as I read the research on it, I was like, well, yeah, Alex, you moron. Like, but you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? And then you look back and you go, wow, we could have been better at doing this. So, number one, pain is not a signal originating from body tissue. Rather, it is a compelling perceptual experience generated on the basis of an apparent need to protect tissues from harm. Like I said, the stress or the pain signaling can come from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's affecting you in your environment can manifest as a physical form of pain.
So reread that one more time.
Yep.
Read what you just read.
Right. You want me to slow down?
Yeah,
Slow down. Okay.
not too
Pain,
much.
just a little bit. Pain is not a signal originating from bodily tissues. Rather, it is a compelling perceptual, so it's a perception. It's a perceptual experience generated on a basis of an apparent need to protect tissues from harm.
So saying that another way, you could say if my shoulder hurts, that does not necessarily mean that my shoulder has damage.
Correct.
It means that my nervous system, for one reason or another, is trying to keep it from getting damaged. Or it
Yes.
could mean that. It could
It
also mean it's damaged, but
correct.
it likely sometimes means that for one reason or another, your body is perceiving elevated levels of danger.
Mm-hmm.
So it is trying to get you to protect that area of your body to keep it from getting damaged.
Yes. Yep. Or the damage is already done and we're trying to keep it from furthering the damage, or there is impending damage that could happen because of the situation you're in or the activity
Mm-hmm.
you're doing. So then that's where you get to that, like how much of that is psycho, how much is that the environment, the social, like what components go to it. So it's the perception that there could be pain brought to the tissue, or you could be putting yourself in harm's way. So that's the first concept, is that pain originates from the perception of, what did they say exactly? Of an experience that is being generated. So
Interesting.
whatever you're experiencing, whatever that may be, the pain doesn't necessarily have to come from an internal source, but the
Yeah.
pain signaling is internal, which is wild. That you can be, like you're experiencing it's external things, but it's not actually happening, like your tissue isn't actually experiencing that,
Mm-hmm.
but your body's perceiving it, your brain is, which then in
Right.
turn is signaling your body to say, hey, prepare for something because it might happen
Right.
or it is happening.
Yeah. It just goes to show, like diving. You can dive deeper into that. Your five senses are your body's connection to the outside world, but everything that happens inside your brain
Mhm.
is a perception, and it's fallible, and it's subject to interpretation based off of whatever your life experiences are, your perception of the world, your emotional state,
Right.
lots of different factors. And your eyes perceive light and color, but your eyes don't actually see. Your brain sees, quote
Yeah.
unquote, sees,
Yeah.
and you're sort of hallucinating the world around you inside of your brain based off of these sensory organs. Same with the sense of touch. So,
Mhm.
more relevant to pain, it's interesting. I definitely see this in adolescence, where if you're 12 and you're not a natural, like, rough and tumble kid, you are going to perceive any physical intensity as
Mhm.
pain.
Yeah.
Like any intense physical sensation hurts
Hmm.
to somebody who isn't accustomed to that, right? I see it in the weight room all the time. If I'm teaching a beginner who is like 11, 12, 13, how to do, say, walking lunges, something super basic, they'll be like, that really hurts. And I'll be, my strategy, and truthfully, I don't know if this is textbook considered correct, but this works for me, in my environment. I go, good. That's what we're going for, right?
I mean,
And the idea there is to mold their perception around that sensation
Mm-hmm.
as not a bad thing. I think it's important that you don't react to that. If somebody says that, I think it's important that you don't react and go like, oh my gosh, really? Where does it hurt? Like, well, we need to be careful because you're furthering their, I guess, misguided perception about that physical intensity. Because
Yeah.
it's amazing, like if you reshape their perception of that sensation, suddenly it doesn't hurt anymore. Suddenly they learn to almost like it, right? Just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of fascinating because they're not like tearing their quad off. They're doing walking body weight lunges,
Yeah.
like,
You're gonna be all right, kid. Yeah.
but they don't know that,
No, their
right?
body doesn't know it. It's a new experience for them. Yeah.
It's unfamiliar.
Mhm.
So it's interesting when it was phrased. The phrasing of that statement you read, I think, that's a well put together statement because it really illustrates a lot of the layers there of that, right?
Mhm.
And I can tell you too, like from personal experience, depending on what you have going on in your life, in your state, in your emotions, and things like that, like different things feel different,
Yeah.
right? And when I was playing football, you got to get your mind right to get hit that way because
Mhm.
if you're going to go play a contact sport and you're not in the right headspace, it hurts.
Well,
It hurts.
and you're gonna get fucked up because
Yeah.
you can't be the nail. You got to be the hammer. Otherwise, someone's gonna come for your neck. Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
but if you get yourself in the right headspace, then the body craves contact
Yeah.
and it's not so bad.
Yeah, and
Right.
then you're like, oh, I'm having fun now, which is
Yeah.
okay. So that's kind of the second one. So that first one is very important to understand when it comes to pain. That the body generates the pain signals, not just necessarily due to what is happening to the body, but also what is happening around the body and how it's perceiving the system or the environment you're in. That's very important when it comes to pain. Exactly like you said with adolescents. We do that with rehabs when we have people coming in and they're like, oh, that really hurt when I did that. It's like, okay, do like 10 more. Okay, that hurt less. And it's like 10 more. Okay, that hurt less. And it's like that idea of it. This is getting to the last piece, which of course is the part where I was like, man, we're idiots. Why do we not perceive this better? But either way, number two is pain is not an accurate measure of tissue damage. This is something that I definitely staked a fair amount of my pain measures when I had people come into the clinic on was like, a higher pain number usually indicates more damage. Not true, right? So a perfect example is we look back. I'm a great example of this. I completely tore my UCL and I was still throwing and I was relatively fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in and the doctors go, well, how much does it hurt? And I'm like, I don't know, not that much. Like it could hurt more. And they're like, okay, you're not positive for any of the tests. And then they go, well, you tore everything in your elbow. And you go, well, I guess that wasn't that bad. Like at least it didn't break, but
Yeah.
so
Right.
pain does not directly correlate to how much damage is there, which then brings the last point. This is the one that I think you and I are going to have the largest amount of agreement upon, which is something that makes sense to us. The plasticity of the nervous system means that the nervous system itself is a viable target for treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue it's one of the most viable ways to treat pain. Because realistically, when we look at treating pain, this is kind of we're segueing into the next point that I wanted to get to is like how do we treat it or why do we treat it, right? When you look at what I do and what you do and what physical therapists do, we don't actually do that much as far as treating pain. Like the body heals in its own way. The body heals in its own time. You can't really accelerate it all that much. The only way you can accelerate it is if you can somehow exogenously, so we're talking like stem cells, PRP, those kinds of things. You can bring more nutrients or more of the healing components into the system, creating an accelerated property. The other way is exogenously, you can force the body to generate more of those, i.e., like steroids, those kinds of things, performance enhancing drugs that then, and I hate that the stigma is that steroids are bad. Steroids can be really good. Performance enhancers can be really good.
Don't
Let's
abuse them.
let's
But
let's 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 not just file that away. But
no.
these things can help the body heal much quicker because they allow the body to generate larger amounts, or they just are larger amounts of things that are already in your system. We're just
Yeah.
amplifying those things. So those are the ways that you can expedite healing. Most of those happen externally. We have that shockwave device at our clinic. I think that works well because it forces the body, once again, is external, uses sound waves to force the body to allot more healing components to the area.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, you would not get this, so to speak, right? Otherwise, the only way we treat pain is just like you said. We have to desensitize the body enough to understand that neurologically we're okay. Like the plasticity of knowing that the pain receptor isn't the same from when you're 1 day old to when you're 100 years old. The pain receptor changes in time as you become more or less conditioned to the pain or to the activity that you're doing. Think about the first time you picked up a 300-pound, you put 300 pounds on your back.
Right.
Feels like your spine's going to explode.
Yeah.
And then you do it over and over and over again. And then you're like, oh, okay, my spine's fine now.
Yeah. Well, I said that example is a good example. Just the other day, I was talking to a 15-year-old. He's learning to back squat, and he's like, I was trying to get him to hold the bar in the place that I want him to hold it in, right? And I'm like, I mean, you got to hold it here, man. Like if it's there, he's like, that hurts. That hurts just as much. And I'm like, look, man, like,
look, buddy,
it's a steel bar pressing down on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to feel good. It's just like, you'll just get used to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not hurting you. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to damage you. You
Right.
might get a little bit bruised from time to time if it's real heavy, but you are not going to get injured from that. It's just uncomfortable. No different than the squatting itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your legs are going to be uncomfortable because you're pushing them hard. The bar on your back is not like the most comfortable thing in the world because
Mm-hmm.
it's steel pressing down on your body, but you will get used to it. Trust me. Right.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
even just that knowledge is placating for our nervous system. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think people oftentimes talk about the nervous system like it's this thing that's separate from the human, right? Like
It is the
they
human.
say it like, oh, it's the digestive system, right? But the nervous system is the brain too, right? The central
Yeah.
nervous system is the brain, the spinal cord, and
Mm-hmm.
the peripheral nerves. And the peripheral nervous system goes into the central nervous system. But when you say central nervous system, that is a person. You are your central nervous system. Everything about your consciousness is your brain. Everything about you as a personality, as a learner, as a athlete, as a human being lives in your central nervous system. So when we talk about the central nervous system, I think it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, how like the central nervous system that you're talking about, like um, manipulating or training or whatever it is, that's just a person. You're talking about the whole human
Mm-hmm.
is comprised in that system. And so if you can build the right environment, you're going to change somebody's perception of discomfort, of pain, right away, right?
Yep.
And the plasticity of that means that adaptation actually sticks around, like that. It's a robust adaptation. It isn't dependent on the environment every single time forever. Those changes in perception stick, and that's how you develop quote unquote toughness,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like, so I think it's really interesting to think about the plasticity of that, because when you look at like, okay, well, how do I develop quote unquote mental toughness and physical toughness, and how are those different, right? There's definitely some overlap there, right? Because physical toughness is about your perception and your ability to handle physical pain, but that is related to your ability to manage your emotions and your reaction to that physical pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an emotional reaction. What happens when you get hurt when you're like 9 and you fall, you scrape your knee, right? What do?
You freak out.
You cry, you
Yeah.
freak out,
Yeah.
right? Like it's an emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's silly to ignore that connection, I think.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think you absolutely nailed it. The idea that your toughness or that you exist separate of the systems in your body is negligent. Like the
Mm-hmm.
fact that this is one of my biggest, this is a whole nother can of worms. This is one of my biggest gripes when people are like, we need to get your central nervous system working. It's like, What do you mean? What does
He's
that
alive.
mean?
He's
What
alive. His
do you
mental
need me to
nervous
stop?
system.
Do I breathe more? Should I breathe less? Like that part, that is like, you can't force that, right? Like this is part of the neuroplasticity, exactly what you're saying. If you want to get somebody to be better at being uncomfortable, you have to get uncomfortable more often. Like you have to do things that are what was I was listening to of course there's a Huberman thing. So take this with a grain of salt. Caveat about Huberman. Super intelligent guy. Quotes all the research. Some of the research isn't so great, but that's neither here nor there. This
Not,
this
not his
one,
fault,
not his
really.
fault. It's part of like the production of what he has to do, but it's also he does a really good job of doing what we're doing here. We're just taking research which is in this. I mean, like these 10 articles I read last night or over the last week are probably like 200 some odd pages. It's just so boring, but it's hard to get all the crap down. Either way, the point is that getting uncomfortable is important because it forces adaptation. Forcing
Mhm.
adaptation keeps us younger for longer, right? And this doesn't just have to be physical stresses. It can also be mental stresses. So doing things that you don't like. So for me, I even the other day I was like, man, I should read because I don't like reading. I haven't done it yet, but I'm considering it. But because like I enjoy
Thinking
reading,
about it stressed me out.
I enjoy reading for the sake of like doing this. This is interesting to me, those kinds of things, and this is not hard for me to do. But to sit down and read like a novel, I don't know what it is, but it's never been. I just can't do it. So what I got, but those things that would be forcing something that I don't like. I'm using parts of my brain. I'm using parts of my neurology that I don't use all the time, creating pictures on my own from my imagination, from someone else's words, not from my thoughts, which then is going to keep those synapses alive as I move forward. It's going to, there was the research he was quoting is basically that you have your neurological degeneration is significantly decreased if you do these kinds of things consistently, not
Mhm.
all the time, but consistently throughout your life. So every couple of months you come back to it and you're like, okay, I need to refresh those neurons, or I need to do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that.
Mhm.
But this goes back to that neuroplasticity point. You can change your perception. You can change it because
Mhm.
it really comes down to it's your choice as a human. It's the perfect example of like people who are, you know, it's kind of like this is a little verbose or a little like over the top, but like the people who will like cut their spleens out and put them back together, like the old school like tricks that they used to do at like the carnivals. Guys
Mhm.
would like, cut their palm off and put it back on. That just doesn't happen overnight. Like you have to get used to like, okay, I have a knife in my hand and I'm cutting the skin away from my palm and I know it's going to heal. Like to just
Yeah.
get comfortable with that. Could you imagine sitting there and be like, hey, I'm going to watch this,
Yeah.
and you're just fine
Well,
with it? You know how much
and
time that would take?
here's a more modern day example. MMA fighters
Yeah,
will
that's a way better
take
example. Forget my
the
example. Listen to this one.
in
This
order
is
to in
much
order to
better.
toughen up their shins because they kick each other in the leg so hard all the time. They'll they'll kick a lot, right? They'll
Mm.
kick objects a lot, but they'll also take like say like a wooden broomstick and they'll grind it so you can picture almost like your pin like a rolling pin, but they'll grind that up and down their shin bone, right? And what they'll say, what's common to say is like, oh, I'm like killing off the nerve endings in my shin, right? So that it's like numb. But I'm not sure that physiologically is correct. I think you're just desensitizing your brain's perception of that sensation.
Yep.
I'm not sure you're actually like frying the nerve endings by doing that. I think you're just literally getting used to it,
Mhm.
right? And I don't know if it's any deeper than that from a physiological standpoint. I think you're just getting used to your shin hurting,
Yeah.
right? And you see it happen from time to time, where a guy will injure his leg and he doesn't notice right away,
Yeah.
right? Like, do you remember the was
John
it
Bones Jones. Or no,
it was
Andrew
Anderson
Silva.
Silva?
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Snapped his
leg
leg.
kicked, snapped his leg, and didn't notice until he like tried to put his foot down, and
Yeah.
like his foot wasn't there, But he didn't even feel it because
Yeah.
he's so used to just his leg hurts all the time. So it's just
Yeah.
like, well, that's just what my leg feels like,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And now here's what's interesting about that concept. You might have somebody who has like a chronic, like let's take somebody with scoliosis for example, right?
This is the next thing I wanted to get to. So yeah, you're right on the perfect.
So,
Go.
somebody who with scoliosis might experience back pain their whole life,
Mhm.
right? They get to, let's say they get to their 60s, and that chronic like low hum of low grade back pain that's been in the background of their mind their whole life, suddenly it's like, bring back to the volume knob example, suddenly that volume knob seems to get turned up,
Mhm.
and that chronic pain worsens, or their perception of it worsens, and now they kind of need to do something about it. And a common treatment for things like that, especially in cases like scoliosis, where they're not going to go in and do like an orthopedic surgery per se.
Right.
Like a spinal fusion isn't necessarily going to fix the problem, because you'd have to go and like scoliosis, for anybody who does not know, is like an incorrect curve in the spine. Like you're supposed to have a curve looking at a person from the side, but looking at a person from the straight on view, it should be straight, right? So scoliosis has a secondary curve from that straight on view. So in order to fix scoliosis from a orthopedic standpoint, what people have done in the past is literally go and put like titanium rods alongside the spine so that it holds it lengthened and straight. But there's a lot of downsides there, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how
Tons.
frequently that surgery gets done anymore, but
Not very much.
maybe in only really severe cases. But
Yeah.
anyway, a fusion isn't going to fix, like you have to, the whole spine is messed up, so you can't just like fuse a couple vertebrae. It's not a disc issue. So what they'll do is they'll go and they will do a procedure where they actually fry off the nerve endings, right? So what people say the UFC fighters are doing to their shins, they will actually do that medically.
Yeah.
They'll laser off the nerves so that the nerves can't send signals back and forth. So regardless of what's going on in the back, you just can't feel it. You might even have like a numb spot on your back, but it's a minor thing and you're not in pain anymore. So bringing it like full circle here, this is a question, not a statement. And I don't know, maybe you have the answer, maybe you don't. Why might that happen to a person if the tissue and the physical orthopedic situation has not changed?
Mhm.
Why might the nerves start sending signals differently, louder input, and what can they do about that beyond going and frying them off?
Right. Great question. So it can happen for a lit. I mean, like we just talked about, it can happen for a litany of reasons, right? So it can happen for 1 million reasons. But
Mm-hmm.
normally, if we were to put it into like three baskets, three bins, okay, one and usually the most common issue is deconditioning. So usually it's as people age, they aren't as physically active or as robust as they once were, or they aren't demanding as much of their body and they become a little more stagnant. In turn, the tissue that may have been holding up the structure, right? So like the scaffolding that is holding up the outside of the building as they're recreating it, like imagine you're in Venice and this ruins are kind of crumbling, but they're like, oh, if we put the scaffolding up and we put these tarps over it and then we build it back up, then no one will ever know the difference. So your muscles are like the tarps and the scaffolding holding
Yeah.
up the Vatican, essentially, right? Once the tarps and the scaffolding stop going all the way to the top, the roof starts to cave in, and that's that degeneration is just that's unfortunately no one beats time and no one beats gravity,
Yeah,
right? So
age-related
yeah,
sarcopenia in terms of the muscle tissue degenerating a little bit
correct.
faster over time. I imagine, I just had this thought too. Everything affects everything, and
Hmm.
and it's probably silly to ignore the role of hormones in that equation,
Yes.
especially when it comes to aging.
Hmm.
The tissue may not be as so. Again, like full circle, the one of the very first things you said, one of the very first key concept being that it's not necessarily indicative of tissue damage. It
Correct.
sometimes is indicative of the nervous system trying to prevent tissue damage.
Yeah, the
So
the
if the
the
nervous system has, yeah,
perception of possible damage. Yeah.
so if the nervous system has some awareness on some level that the hormone profile has changed,
Yep.
then the conclusion that your autonomic nervous system is going to likely come to is that you do not have the same capacity for healing. So you need to prevent damage like it's that much more important to prevent any tissue damage.
Yeah, that's
So
plausible. It's very
if your hormone profile is messed up or has degenerated over time, then you're not going to have the same capacity for healing. So your nervous system would be prudent to draw the conclusion that it's that much more important to prevent tissue from getting damaged because you're not going to heal very easily.
correct. And this is that's extremely plausible. And this goes back to what I like the small caveat I had about like PEDs and things like that. It's like there are so many ways to sustain these things nowadays that we have access to, and they get blackballed because people don't understand what they are. But this is one of the things that, like, if you can maintain the structure, so this is basket number one. We're still in basket one, right? If you can maintain the structure, the scaffolding, the tarps, the musculature, create the system to be as conditioned, as robust as possible for as long as possible, you will have the least amount of side effects unless you do something to yourself unbeknownst, right? So unless you, I don't freaking know, man. Like, unless you all of a sudden get osteoporosis and one of your vertebrae just happens to collapse, like sometimes, like maybe you were just chosen to do that, right? Like that's, maybe that was just part of your destiny, or like that's just your path that your body was born to take. Like, this was pre-written for you by the gods or whatever, and you're just going down your path, right? So that's bucket one, deconditioning. Number two, I think, comes down to the perception, which could be like a sub bucket of one, I guess, now talking about it. But this is the perception of pain, right? So it's more of a, let's just make them all sub buckets because they probably are. They're all relatively related. But this is another thing that could happen because you're deconditioned, because you're weaker, because you're not as robust as you were. The small amounts of information that you were getting now seem like larger amounts of information. So that small amount of pain, or that small tweak, or that small, like, getting out of the couch now is harder for you. So then in turn, your body perceives that as a risk because your system, your environment is essentially changing, right? So it takes more effort. So then in turn, that volume knob gets turned up, you get more pain. I think the last one then becomes this one's more of a mental part, I would imagine. Knowing that you're older, knowing that you're weaker, knowing that you're more at risk, knowing that you aren't as young as you used to be, your body perceives all of those things, your nervous system, your brain. In turn, you're going to get more pain because you're at risk. Your environment now, you've tipped back, right? So imagine you're a lion, right? You're in the desert. You're the pinnacle, you're the apex predator, you run the whole food chain. You're 5 years old. You're doing great. You're 15 years old. You're doing great. You're 18. I don't know how long lions live, but it can't be much past 20.
I was just
I was
thinking
going to say
like,
it can't be much past 20 years to live. I would guess maybe 25, right? So, we're going down. Oh, I lost a couple of my teeth. Oh no, I stepped on that thorn. That hurts a lot more. I'm not as fast as I used to be. Ooh, I'm kind of in pain. I'm going to curl up under this tree and I die. So it's like it's the same thing that happens with us as humans, right? Like as we age, you can only float the boat for so long. Eventually, it's like I said, no one beats time, no one beats gravity. Did you see the pictures of Jimmy Carter the other day? 100 years old, getting rolled out of there.
I hadn't. There's
Dude,
okay, hang on. We're gonna do two.
If I look like that when I'm 100,
lions, a male lion in the wild lives 8 to 10 years. A female lives 15 to 16 years.
Okay, so bump my timeline by half.
Now,
move me down.
Second sidebar: Jimmy Carter is not alive.
Yeah, whatever that thing was. Yeah,
that's a dead body. I don't care what that. There's no freaking way he has any awareness of what's going on around him. I feel that video that I saw, or the photos that I saw of him, like at that whatever he was at with his family, that made me feel such a bad emotion.
I felt pain.
It made me feel horrible. I was like, oh my God. Like, put that poor guy out of his misery. Like, he's been in hospice care, like quote unquote hospice care, for like 2 years. Usually when people go to hospice, you're like, oh, they're going to die next week. Like,
nah.
He either just refuses to die, or they refuse to let him go. Like, they're artificially keeping him alive for God knows what reason.
They've been feeding him peanuts, man. Feeding him peanuts. It's just keeping him alive. The peanut farmer can't die. But if I am ever like that, I hope someone just literally just pushes me out of the chair. Just push me out.
Launch me into the sun.
Yeah. Oh, so bad.
Oh my God.
But that is, I think those are so really it isn't 3 buckets. as far as like the question that you asked for, like why pain can become a problem as we move further down the line, it really is. It all comes back to the perception of what your body is and isn't capable of. And as we age or as time goes on, that perception changes.
Mm-hmm.
We, whether we want it to or not, it does. You know, like we, a perfect example is like we're lucky enough, you and I are lucky enough that we are still able, like what we perceive that we can and can't do is still is like up, like our trajectory is still up.
Mm-hmm.
We are running out of time, obviously, but like for right now at this point in our lives, like our trajectory will trend up for quite a while, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is a tipping point where, like I said, it's the lion in the wild, 5 years old. You're starting to come down, man. So you can't just perpetuate for forever. So the body does know, like we perceive the environmental stimulus of like our body deteriorating, and in turn our body can then like all of a sudden pains can become a problem. It's
Yeah.
just, I
Yeah.
think that's
And
how
there's
it
definitely
goes.
there's an element of choice here, right? Like how many times have you been around somebody? You're over 30 now, so you
Yep.
probably don't hear it anymore. But I I hear people be like, just wait till you turn 30. It's all downhill from there. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, 30, 30? Like,
You're in the pocket there, man. That's when
dude,
you
Tom,
can,
Tom
yeah.
Brady played in the NFL at 44 or whatever. Like,
No,
you're choosing that. You're
I
choosing that. You know,
did.
like you've decided
Mhm.
that your body is going to deteriorate now,
Yep.
and so you're going to let it happen, or you're going to just decide that everything hurts
Mhm.
because you're 30 now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 30, I'm old.
We,
Like, that's a perception. Now, with that said, I'm having this thought too. I don't think I want to make sure that this doesn't sound flippant, right? Like pain is not something where you can just be like, oh, just decide that it doesn't hurt and then it won't hurt anymore. Like that's not what we're saying, right? It's not. Have you thought about have you thought about changing your perception of your pain?
have you
Like,
thought about
dude, my
trying
leg
harder?
broke. Fuck off. So it's not that, right?
No, no,
It's a deeper psychosomatic thing than that. You can't just be
correct.
like, oh man, I'm having like really bad back pain. Have you considered not having your back hurt? You're
Have you
welcome.
considered growing up, Peter Pan?
That'll be
Uh,
yeah.
no,
That'll be
yeah,
$5,000.
no. We're
That's not
talking
what we're
about
saying at all.
what the science of pain, the
Yeah.
understanding of the underlying causes of pain, and most of the time. So this was another thing I wanted to get to. This is a good time for it anyway. Um, a lot of this applies to chronic pain because us as a country, we have this terrible relationship with chronic pain in this
Mm-hmm.
country and acute pain. We believe that the human body is meant to exist without pain, which is just not true. If you're living your life and you're doing things, pain is something that you should experience.
Mm-hmm.
It is good for you. In in certain dosages, it is good for you. So this idea that you can be in chronic pain, Chowder, good
There he is.
appearance. Yep, welcome back. But Chowder doesn't experience pain. Look at that guy. He's happy as a clam. But the point is that
You
I
have to have a
think
nervous system to experience pain.
not enough brain
This
cells.
dude, not a single neuron in this body. Look at his
Can you
stupid
clone him? I want that cat. Make me another one of those. Look at that guy. What a cat.
face.
But I think the biggest issue is that when we look at chronic pain, your perception, especially when you are in pain for a very long time, when you have perpetual pain or you perceive that the pain will never end, it gets really hard to get out of pain because
Mm-hmm.
you think that you're broken. Like you think that your your neurological perception of your environment is that you are broken. You are the lion that was born without a paw. You don't have teeth. You're in the wild all on your own. The pack doesn't want you anymore because humans are pack animals. We are. That's just how we function. We really aren't that far evolved. We're all Neanderthals. Like we're all apes throwing coconuts. Like that's what we do, right? So this idea that pain is something that is just going to stay with you for forever is not wrong, but you need to come to grips with the fact that just because you're in pain doesn't mean you're going to be in pain at that level for forever. You
Mm-hmm.
can heal, you can get better, but the problem is that our society has this like perception that, oh, your pain is just whatever. Like, here, take this and it'll make it better and you won't be in pain. But maybe you shouldn't be in that pain anyway because you've let yourself get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
You've allowed your brain to allow you to deteriorate, or you've gone so far in the hole, and this is part of like depression, anxiety. Like this is the whole psychosomatic part of the pain. That's the perception piece. That's what we're trying to get at here. The science of this is that the pain is not actually just the physical experience of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
also the neurological development of the pain due to the environment that you may or may not be experiencing at the time. So
Right.
that's what we're trying to get at here. People can be in pain. You break your hand, it hurts. You're in
Right.
pain. You knock your
Yeah.
teeth out, it hurts. You're in pain. But
Yeah.
being sad also manifests pain in a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
way.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a very common symptom of like chronic stress or depression,
Mm,
where you have like your body aches, your
yeah.
back, you have severe back pain, right? Like I think we've all heard like, oh, where do you carry your stress? And I think some folks out there are like, but you really do. You
Hmm.
carry your stress physically around with you. I know exactly where mine is. it's it's in my neck,
Yeah.
but um, that's unique for each person, right?
Mhm.
And then like your past experiences shape it as well, right? When my when my shoulder hurts, it does not freak me out all that much because I played baseball and I'm accustomed to experiencing pain there.
Mhm.
But when my knee hurts, that sets off a little bit more alarms because I'm not accustomed to that.
Right.
I hadn't dealt with that,
Mhm.
right? So your experiences shape that too. And it's also like going back to like shaping it through childhood as well, like your understanding of something that I think that is a good thing to do sometimes is like if a kid like has a minor acute thing, right? Like let's say I don't know, he doinks his noggin on something, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good idea to be like, that doesn't hurt, right? I think
Mhm.
it's more of a good idea to acknowledge, like, yeah, man, I've done that before. Like, that hurts really bad, doesn't it? But you'll
Mhm.
be all right.
Yeah. Like, are
Right?
you okay? Like, how
I
you
think
doing?
that's a better angle, I think, to approach it from. Acknowledge that pain is real, and yes, this hurts, uh, but I'm fine,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, because that helps shape somebody's willingness to experience that pain.
Mhm.
I think, right? Because like going like you said, and I think frequency trumps intensity here. By the way,
Always.
I
I
think
don't know if there's.
experiencing some discomfort every day at like a low intensity is a better idea than like every so often just crushing yourself physically via working out or I don't know, and I think that the research would I don't have anything to cite, but I think the research would likely support that. Um,
I mean, it's the simple of like if we're talking about the neurological plasticity, what's the easiest way to change neurology is frequency.
yes.
Large bouts of intensity don't create permanent change. They create immediate change that then does not
Mm-hmm.
last. So yeah, I would agree. But I totally agree as far as this is another, this is a whole nother like an issue in our culture is that everything it has to be a lot or a little. Like, why can't we just experience things in moderation? Like, why can't you
Mm-hmm.
just like you hit your head? Yeah, I get it, man. Like that hurts. It's okay. You'll hit your head again. It's gonna happen. You're
Yeah.
gonna fall
Right.
over, right? So I totally agree, man. I think that when it comes to the pain science or like the experience of pain, especially with whether you're younger, you're older, you're deconditioned, you aren't, like you have to remember that pain comes from inside of you. Like it's an external expression of something that is happening to you. And you're
Mm-hmm.
not just registering it physically, like through your tissue or through your body, you're neurologically experiencing it as well. And like you said, I think that was so well how you're like hallucinating through life because you are like
Yeah.
the perception of what you're going through carries almost all of the weight,
Mm-hmm.
almost all of the weight because you, besides your leg like being broken, the human body is unbelievable. It can deal
Yeah.
with immense amounts of. A perfect example is like look at an alcoholic, literally poisoning themselves to death, and they'll live 40 years. Some will
Yeah.
live 70, and then
Yeah.
their liver will stop working. But the fact that your liver can literally die, like you can chop your liver down to like what is it, like 20% of its original size and it will grow back?
I think you can donate if somebody needs a liver transplant. I think you can donate like more than half of a healthy liver,
Don't
and
quote
it'll
us on that.
regenerate.
Don't quote
I'm
us on
not.
that, but
Yeah, that's a Google here.
yep. Yeah, look it up.
Let's fact check that real quick.
Give it a
How
goog.
much of your liver can grow back? That's a Google search that suggested it can regrow. This is the very first thing. National Institute of Health. It can regrow up to 90% of its mass.
Oh my God.
The liver
That's
can regrow to a
insane.
normal size even after up to 90% of it has been removed.
So think about it this way. Okay, here's a good example. So think about if you literally chopped yourself off from right here, right on your neck, and the rest of your body grew back. That's unbelievable. Okay,
Yeah,
so but
unbelievable.
that's the point, is that the human body is so adaptable and it can do so many things, and your nervous system, the perception of what your nervous system can and can't do is just, it's unending, really. It's all comes down to your perception and your knowledge of whether you're not you want to make a change, or you want to admit that you are in pain, or you have things going on, or that you're like, this comes back to just like the balance part of just knowing yourself well enough to understand when you're in a bad spot and you're experiencing pain, like maybe get in a better spot and
Mm-hmm.
then experience the pain, because you might be more apt to experience less pain while doing the same things, and
Mm-hmm.
you might actually get something out of it. But if you show up, this is like what we work with young guys. They show up and they're in a bad headspace and they come in and they don't feel good. It's like, you weren't going to feel good anyway. You weren't
Yeah.
ready for this training session. Like you're not ready to be here. Or someone comes in and sees me at the clinic and they've made a conscious decision to get there, but then at the same time they aren't ready to receive any of the information that, like, I'm trying to help them. They've already
Not
decided
fully,
that their ship has sailed. They're just here to
not
get
fully present.
confirmation.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's
They want to get validated. Like,
mhm.
yes, something's wrong with me. All right, cool. Yeah. I
Yeah.
my newest line is, especially with like ninth grade,
Mhm.
roughly that age level. Because like I said, I think that that's a key time in life to like reframe your perception around this.
Yes.
When they arrive at training, I've been asking them if they're ready to suffer. Like, are you ready to suffer today?
Mhm.
Ready to,
Are you ready to
and
suffer? Come on.
at first there's a handful of kids who are like, hell's wrong with this guy,
This
but
guy's insane.
they're coming around. All
Mhm.
right, so let's touch on this last bullet point on our thing here. how,
Yeah.
how do we how do we treat it? Like, how do we help people? Like, let's two different scenarios. So one, we have chronic pain. Like,
Mhm.
I've got chronic back pain or chronic knee pain,
Sure.
but not a lot of like no acute injury has occurred,
Mhm.
right? But I'm experiencing chronic pain. And then number two would be, I've got like a grade 2 muscle strain in my hamstring or my
Mhm.
spinal erector or my quadricep.
Yeah.
How do I treat somebody's pain in those two scenarios?
So chronic pain. Sorry, my wife she's doing laundry. She's a good woman. So when it comes to chronic pain, that is more of a chronic pain is tough because you're really dealing with the person's, that's more of the psychoanalytical model. You have to change the perception because the pain has been around for so long. And this
Mm-hmm.
is, let's take like anecdotally, let's say it's like a 65-year-old who's had chronic low back pain for a very long time. They're relatively healthy. They have a good home life. They're going to have grandkids. Like, they have a lot of good things going for them. That's a much easier case to deal with because they
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of positivity in their life. They have things to look forward to. It's going to be easy to get that person to want to do things to get out of pain.
Mm-hmm.
So to get out of pain for them is more so like probably some type of physical activity, probably a little bit of strengthening, probably maybe some stretching, or maybe even just getting off the couch a little more often. Or if they're already really active, maybe adding in a little, like, you gotta, the hard part is when you start looking at chronic pain, you have to take into account the lifestyle, like the
All of
whole
it.
picture of what their
Yeah.
life is. Because if you have it, like that person, that 65-year-old who has a lot of things to look forward to is going to get out of pain. We have a client right now. She's awesome. She's a freaking rock star, has had 2 knee replacements, has gone to a bunch of different places, has had terrible answers because they're like, oh, we'll just do this. We'll just do this. Da, 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 da. She's got grandkids. She wants to be active. We gave her like 4 exercises and she got better.
Mm-hmm.
But that could have been just because she came in and we said, hey, I think you're going to be okay. We just gave
Yeah.
her the ability to think that
You know,
she's going to get out of
almost like
pain.
almost like you're giving them permission.
Yeah. And sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes you just have to be able to look at people and be like, hey, like there's no reason why you can't be out of pain or have less pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that person is a completely different person than the person who's sat in the chair for 15 plus hours a day ever since they retired. That chronic pain patient is going to be a lot harder because you're going to have to add things into their life or give them reasons to get out of pain besides just for the sake of wanting to get out of pain. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to give external stimulus or external things to go for, like goal based things that will help them stay out of pain. So, those, when we come to treating it that way, the chronic pain ones, there are so many variables that go into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much more difficult road to hoe in some senses, but other times it's easier.
Yeah,
So that's about where I would leave that one. That one's got so many variables that we could talk for. You could take one case and talk for an hour and a half on that case,
for
just
sure.
because of how they work, right? But it all depends. I think the biggest thing is getting out of chronic pain if you're older or even if you're younger and you have chronic pain. Like you need positive things to look forward to in your life that aren't just revolving around getting out of pain. You need motivators. You need external motivators. You need internal motivators. You need things that are going to give you reason to get up every day and just be better at, like to get better out of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a grade 2, like hamstring strain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This comes back to the body heals in time, right? We can only expedite the process so much. Uh, grade one, grade two is probably 6 to 8 weeks before it's back to 100%. But if you do the right things, you can desensitize it and trick it into thinking it's better in a couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks. Will it actually be healed? No. But will it be more tolerant? Yes. Uh, the
Here's a
way,
question for you on
yeah,
that end. Like, this is sort of devil's advocate kind of question, but is that actually a good idea? Because I've had this thought before, right? Where with my own, with this is related to me,
yeah.
right? Just knowing that my pain tolerance, because I'm used to certain things, right?
Mhm.
Like, you remember like I don't know how many, it was months ago probably. You remember when I did the erector strain in my back
Yeah.
when we were deadlifting, and I
Mhm.
strained my left side erector,
Mhm.
and I felt better in like 5 days,
Yeah.
you know, but I still like knowing me and knowing like that was kind of like a legitimate injury there. I waited another like 2 weeks before really stressing that.
Yeah.
Just knowing like just because it hurts does not hurt anymore does not really mean it's healed, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So the question there is if we're really good at desensitizing, say, a hamstring after it's been grade 2 strained, right? And
Mhm.
for those who may not know, like muscle strains have grades: grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Grade
Mhm.
3 is the very severe strain where it's like torn. Like if I tear my hamstring, that is a grade 3. It's detached. You may even need surgery to fix a grade 3 strain, right? Like
Yes.
if I grade 3 tear my pec, I'm going to have to get surgery to put that thing back.
Correct.
Grade 2 strains heal on their own, right? There's still some structure left. Grade 1 strains are almost they don't even count. Like they're
Correct.
super minor usually, right? Grade
Yeah.
2 is a wide kind of range.
Yeah.
So we're talking about something that does not need surgical intervention to fix. It will heal on its own.
Mhm.
So grade 2 hamstring strain, do I even want to desensitize that? Or do I want to be really sensitive to it so that I'm really aware where it's at in its healing process?
Depends what your goal is. So if you want to get back to competing as fast as possible, then you want to desensitize it as quick as you can so you can get back to competing.
Right.
If you want to heal it, you heal it, but at the same time, the sooner you can desensitize tissue to accept load, the
Mm-hmm.
faster. We know that stress adapt recover, stress adapt recover, stress adapt recover,
Yep.
like blah, 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 and you just in perpetuity. So it really really depends on your goal. It really does, because like for me, me well, Zach, like if I have a strain or something, I just will train around it or I'll
Mm-hmm.
train through it because it helps me heal so much faster, and I don't really have like any pressing things that I need to do
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Right.
I'm not going to
And
go.
if by doing it you make it take an extra 2 weeks to heal, you're not. It's whatever,
I'm not
right?
losing or gaining anything really. I'm just gaining the ability to continue to train because that keeps me sane. Like it,
That's
it
what we.
helps my brain.
That's what we
So
want to do.
exactly. So it's like it really. let's take a grade 2 hamstring strain in somebody who needs to compete in a race in 3 weeks, a
Mm-hmm.
sprinter. Okay. Treating that is going to be initially just getting it calmed down enough that you can actually do something with it. So it's probably going to take 2 or 3, 4, maybe 5 days for it to get down to the point where you can actually start like loading it enough to make any type of change. Then you add in some type of eccentric, like lengthening type situation or an isometric, just something that the body can handle at a 3 out of 10 or less pain relative to the body system. And then from there, it's just progress load as they can handle, and then start running when they can handle it. Wrap it up because the vibration of the muscles moving against each other within the thigh as you accelerate and decelerate with the hamstring. That creates a lot of pain just because it irritates the nerve because of the inflammation that then populates around it. So it's like those things are all variables that you have to kind of try and nitpick and control. But really what it comes down to is desensitize, load, and then protect as much as you can. So
Mm-hmm.
moderating volume, moderating intensity when you can, getting just enough intensity to prep for the event that you need to get ready for, but at the same time not going so intense that you're then going backwards and peeling the scab off. And this is the stuff that I do all the time. So it's like I'm just regurgitating things that I say almost every day. But they're two completely different things. Two completely different things. And part of the grade 2 hamstring strain is also, if you have that race that's coming up, is once again educating on the perception of what it is,
Mm-hmm.
educating on the goal of what we're going towards, educating on like, hey, maybe this might not be the best route, but if you want to do this, this is the route we're going to take.
I think you see this a lot with arm pain. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's a lot of the paradigm of pain equals damage to physical therapists and whomever these athletes we see. Whenever they go see somebody, my arm hurts, I go see a doctor. They say, okay, well, take 3 weeks off throwing, 4 weeks off throwing, and then return to throw. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it hurts when you throw, don't throw. All right. And I think there's no acknowledgement to the fact that it's possible that your arm can hurt and there's nothing wrong with your arm. Um,
Yeah, I think you can
and that
perceive that your arm is hurting more so than it actually is.
it's a tissue tolerance equation in
Yep.
many cases. It does not necessarily mean that you have damage. Um, and I think it's important to utilize. I wish imaging was more accessible to rule out actual tissue damage, because it would be very nice for a
Oh,
thrower to go in and just rip like a quick MRI, just confirm that there's no damage, or you know what, see that there is damage and realize like my arm does not hurt,
yeah.
right? Because that's something that we know, like via the research, we know that a lot of throwers have asymptomatic labrum tears. And the conclusion we draw from that is, well, maybe your labrum needs to be a little bit torn
Well,
in
it
order
does.
to, right? Like
Yeah.
the primary adaptation that a thrower is going to have in his arm is range of motion,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's actually quite common to see a throwing shoulder be weaker than the not throwing shoulder.
Yep.
The muscular motor control is oftentimes worse because the throwing is highly passive. So the primary adaptation is range of motion. So you will even see tissues get damaged on some level, but because um, that range of motion is so important to actually execute the movement, that's not painful
Mm-hmm.
because your nervous system is perceiving that whatever's going on there as good because it's getting the outcome that you're going for, right? And then it's not painful until later on when the tissue gets stressed past a certain point because it can't control it, or the motor control deteriorates past that point. You actually get worse over time. You get weaker over time, not stronger over time.
Yeah.
And so paying attention to that is important, right? And then
Yeah.
there's obviously other factors too, but it's arm pain is a bit like low back pain in that everybody who does a certain activity is probably going to get it at some point,
Yep.
and it doesn't really by itself mean anything. You have to investigate further every single time in order to figure out what's going on.
Right. And I think this comes back to the point. The other thing that we were talking about earlier is it's the perception, like, especially when it comes to like training and low back pain, or training and upper back pain, and training and shoulder pain, and training and elbow pain. And you have to, there are so many variables, which is what makes pain difficult. And especially in adolescents who are experiencing things for the first time, the pain knob can get turned way up. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I think this conversation is much better than the one we had last time as far as like
Mm-hmm.
what pain actually is. Last time that was not very good. I apologize. to anyone who listened to that and was like, this guy's a genius.
Well,
That's
this is
on
why
me.
we named the show what we named it.
That's on
Because
me.
this is what we do for a living. We learn.
Yep, exactly. So hopefully this has helped if you listen to this, and hopefully this helps you. Like, because this helped me a ton. I wish I would have known this decades ago. It would have helped me so much. Now, granted, I am the opposite, is where I'll just push to where pain is just not even an object for me anymore, and I'll just continue far into the darkness. But it would be nice to have known that some of the stresses that I was experiencing while I was in pain maybe were amplifying it quite a bit. Like, that would have been nice to have known. But this comes, I think this is, if there's one underlying thing here, is that your mental emotional health also really does drive your physical health. But at the same time, you have to not be so weak in all of those that every little thing that hits you makes a chink in the armor.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find the in between. You have to be sensitive enough to know when you're vulnerable and to know when that you're not in a good spot to train or you're not in a good spot to push. But you also have to be tough enough to know that maybe I am in a good spot and maybe I need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe this is something that I have to do. So take that for what you will, guys. But other than that, Zach, I think that's a pretty good spot. What do you think?
All right. That's
Deal.
the pod. Thanks
Good
for
work.
listening.
Bye.